Good afternoon. I'm so thrilled to be here today with Tim Cyr. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you.
Tim is a bit of a Renaissance practitioner. He practices many things. Tim is an end of life doula and also a Reiki practitioner and a yoga instructor with focus on breath and mindfulness. So happy to have you here today, Tim.
I'm so glad to be with you, Tracy. Yeah.
So the Living Resource Project is a compassionate communities initiative that serves to remind us that we all have what it takes to serve the living and the dying among us, and that we need each other on this journey of life through death. So Tim, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do to serve the dying and their people?
Mm, Thank you, Tracy. What it is that I do? Well, it's kind of multifold. I started off in this life of doing things for other people or with other people over the course of COVID. Before that, I was teaching yoga and meditation on a regular basis, and I started to help people, whether that was little handyman jobs or whether it was moving, decluttering, downsizing, and finding that a lot of those processes were more therapeutic to have someone join the people that were on that process and that journey. And there were a few people in that mix of clients that became friends, and then they were in the process of dying. And so that, for me, the initiation or the beginning of my journey into the death practices of holding space with others, it wasn't intentional, which was such a surprise to me and still is today, how these things unfold. I couldn't have planned it, but I was invited to be with these people when they were dying. And at first, I didn't really know what to think about that because I had been with them through these other processes of letting go of things, the decluttering, the cleaning. But now to be in this end of life journey with them was a whole other aspect that I had never really thought of. And so as I was with them, I was really coming to terms with my own spirituality, my own thoughts about why I'm here, what is my purpose, when is my exit going to happen? Not knowing where that door is, or that, as one of my friends says, that off ramp, it could be any time. And so being with them, we had some really beautiful conversations. And I think it was through those conversations that led me to feel really connected to holding space with people on their journey.
Thank you. When you're talking about those really tangible ways of helping people let go of things or declutter, what came up for me was part of the grief journey on the end of life journey. It's just like farther downstream, right? It's like when you have to start looking at things and like physically letting go of things. I'm imagining that on your part, that might have called for you to hold space for these changes that came in the form of physical items.
Yeah, and it relays into the metaphysical, into the mental and emotional, because we have a lot of, as has been said in the past, baggage.
Yeah.
We've collected a lot of baggage, and no
Yeah.
matter how much we work at letting it go, it really is in the last moments of life, of our existence here, where we might unpack some of those things. And how does that look and feel?
Yeah.
What do we want to let go of and no longer need because we can't take things with us?
Oh, I love that. That's what I use a lot in as an analogy in my death care practice is this idea of traveling light. And
Mm,
I actually see as like a suitcase and I love that you named that. Like, yeah, it's like any journey, any trip you go on, it's usually more graceful if you bring less with you. In the case of the end of
Right.
life journey, what are you carrying that you no longer need to carry? And so that in the end, you can travel lightly. I love that.
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, and you know what image is coming up for me right now is, I don't know if you've watched old movies, like black and white movies from the, mid-century, where a woman would be carrying one little suitcase,
Yes.
her hat, maybe a travel dress,
Yeah.
one little suitcase.
Yeah.
And now in this day and age, people take luggage, like
Yeah.
big honking things, and maybe two or three, and maybe it's some little ones. And it's like back then, there wasn't this need to maybe have as much, to carry as much with us. We
Yeah.
might need just a few dresses or outfits.
Yeah. I see the things and usually in the luggage as being regrets that people haven't shared. So they're really heavy, and grief that hasn't been tended to or shared, and things that haven't been said. I find those are usually the really heavy things that people are lugging around, that they often are interested in finding a way to take out of their luggage and leave them behind.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And even using someone like us as someone that we can be a surrogate to have that conversation with,
Yeah.
the things that they might have wanted to say to someone that's no longer in their life. Tell me,
Yeah.
say what you'd like to say,
Yeah.
and let's talk about it.
Yeah. There's huge value in that. Absolutely.
Mhm.
So, Tim, can you tell us a little bit about the path that led you to your Renaissance practice?
It's somebody had mentioned to me one time, I think it was an uncle. He said, "You're a bit of a Renaissance man, aren't you?" I'm like,
Hmm.
what do you mean? He says, "Well, you're trying this and you're trying that and you're doing this and it's not just to try it, but you're actually interested in it."
Hmm.
And I think that for me, this journey really happened about just being curious.
Hmm.
And I love photography, I love writing, and I think noticing the little details in the world around me is what led me to expand into that. And then being with people
Hmm.
in the processes that we do, either decluttering or letting go of things or having conversations about whatever we need to have, is about the nuances of the details
Hmm.
and looking down at the micro rather than sometimes the macro view. And I love walking out in nature on a path and noticing a little snail that, if we're off on our own world and not really present with what is the mindfulness factor, we wouldn't have noticed that. Or maybe the little green tree frog on the leaf, or
Hmm.
a smell in the air. Or it's the details that I love about what I do. And even coming from 30 years of being a graphic designer, having to notice details.
Hmm.
And all of these things are part and parcel of a path that I never thought I would be on. But when it happened, or when something showed up in front of me, it was, huh, I would like to know more about that. Going from growing up on a ranch in southern Alberta, thinking that as the eldest son, I might be the one that takes over the farming. That path was nowhere near what I felt here.
Hmm.
And so when I exited or left the ranch and went to school to become a graphic designer, and then moved from Alberta to Vancouver to the West Coast, all of these things that I realized too were painful in the moment because they were a huge transition.
Hmm.
But those were the places where the growth was happening.
Hmm.
And even in that moment, I may not have known exactly what was happening until I just surrendered a little bit more to it.
Hmm.
So learning how to teach yoga, and my practice was slow yoga, so restorative and yin practices. So we're really with the holding of the body in the space and the support and comfort, to the meditation practices and the Reiki, using or welcoming in the energy that's all around us and just being curious about it,
Hmm.
noticing that how I interact in the world around me has a ripple effect.
Mm.
That, just being present with someone else, seeing them in that moment, a cashier, how are you doing today?
Mhm.
Many people don't really ask the question or inquire. They're just in and out. Just
Mm.
get me my food and I've gone. So staying curious, I think, is what the Renaissance path has led me to, the inquiry.
Mhm. And you really embody that. I remember when we met up for a walk at Lighthouse Park months ago now, I was so surprised by just how everything seems slowed down and relaxed and tender with you. Like it can be something that you're holding that we shared in conversation, but you're just very aware, you're just very present, but also equally light. Like you're quite silly. And I like that as well. I like that as well. So this depth of being isn't just this serious, heavy stuff, but there's very much a lightness to it that is really refreshing. And it felt like, our hour and a half or whatever in Lighthouse Park, it actually felt like it was about 5 hours in a good way. Like it felt very restful and restorative because I think it's just co-regulating off you because you are so grounded and so calm, and you really do embody these practices that you guide other people in. It was just really remarkable to me. Being with you was very different than being with a lot of other people I spend time with. Yeah.
Thank you. I just take it for granted because I'm around myself 100% of the time.
I
So
guess so, yeah. You're kind of stuck with yourself.
I'm kind of stuck with me. Yeah. So
Yeah.
when I get to play with somebody else, it's like, ooh, let's be curious together. Wow, this is fun. And I think that no conversation feels taboo. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, let's talk about that. And
Yeah.
much of the time, we can find the humor in things that can be really hard to talk about
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And so creating a little bit of space around that. And I like that word you said, co-regulation.
Mm.
That's amazing. And I haven't really thought about that until working with someone recently, and they said, in our decluttering process, it would be very hard for them to do it on their own, but having me there or having someone else there
Mhm.
has helped them to calm themselves and
Mm.
be in a different mindset.
Mm.
And I said, are you sure it's not the jazz music or, that I'm cracking jokes once in a while? Oh, no, no, it's you. It's just you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's real. That energy that people attune to that comes from us. Yeah,
Mhm.
I believe in
Yeah.
that. And your business name is so fitting. I don't think I mentioned that at the beginning of this conversation, but Tim's business is the Do Less Project, which I love, which is sort of to me is synonymous with be more, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And we are taught and we are promoted to do more, to be productive.
Yeah,
If we're sitting reading a book or doing less than what others think we should be doing, then it's different.
yeah.
And like
True.
for example, like the body and the way that it heals in our
Mm.
conversation just before we started this interview, the body speaks and it is not on a timeline.
Mhm.
How do we redesign the envelope around ourselves so that when we can do less, it's healthy, it's supportive rather than diminutive or wrong? Mhm.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Mhm.
So, Tim, can you share a story about the work that you do? Maybe it's a story about a client or a situation that somehow surprised you or deepened your understanding about the end of life journey.
Mhm. There's a few stories, and I love telling stories. But one in particular was a part of my process of the death doula training. And at first, I wasn't thinking of doing the death doula practice or training for it. I had thought, well, if this is what it is, I don't want to look at it as a business or as something that I want to hang up a shingle for and say this is another thing that I do. But I went through the process of learning and being with a beautiful group of individuals who are also on that journey. And being with you, Tracy, and Jennifer was amazing. And it was immediately after we finished our last class, I was traveling back to Vancouver from Main Island where I was dog sitting. And one of my clients had gone into hospice and had induced coma, uh, so that they were more relaxed. But even in that relaxed state, they were pretty agitated. And their partner at the time is a person that she's still living, was a part of his life for the last 7 years. And is immune compromised, so she couldn't be with him in hospice. And so I was her voice, as well as her presence there, and his death doula and his friend. And he had a visitor come by who was a lay minister from a Unitarian church. And we had a beautiful conversation, and she had her personal time with him. And then when I came back into the room, we had a talk about our lives and his life. And she shared something with me that I had never known. And I think that's a part of the process too of being with the dying and their friends and family and community is I get to learn so much. It's like the university of life opens up. And I had learned that 25 years ago, he had done a transition or been in transition from a woman. And but his life was as a man, and that's what was intended. So it was like he'd already gone through a death at that time, and she was present for it. And she talked about the ceremony that had happened, that they had all done together, and then his life after that as it unfolded. And I had only known him as him. And this brought in a whole new perspective around his life and what it must have been like. And through just our conversations, it was so peaceful. And even the nurses that would come in and out of the room were saying how calm he was and relaxed. And there came a point where it was just him and I having our moments together. And I'd set up a little speaker connected to Spotify so that he could listen. We could have some music in the background. And I had to try to figure out his password and all this stuff with his partner on the phone. Well, try this and try this. Okay, so we finally got it. And we were listening to some classical music, which was his favorite. And all of a sudden, in one peaceful moment, came on an advertisement for tires. Get your tires now at Cal Tire before winter, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, well, that was a bit jarring. I don't think you're needing any tires. Probably you're good for that, right? You're all right. Let's see. I'm gonna just set you up on my account because I have a premium account which has no advertisements. So these little moments of levity, I think, are really important because even in that time and space that we were in, which could be very sad and lonely or disheartening, with grief, all of those things, finding these little moments, these little sparks that can relay us back to our humanity, and that being human is not easy, and it's not always clean. It's not sterile, of which so much of our death practices have been in the last 40, 50 years, being closed away behind doors or in a sterile environment, not being real or with the person and their family, their community surrounding them. So that for me was a pivotal moment. And of course, I went into this place not knowing anything, and it was just me. I didn't have a team of people or other practitioners around me. So it was, as one of my teachers said, just empty your glass and let it be refilled by whatever comes. And that's kind of what I did. And like, I have no idea. I had all this knowledge that was in here somewhere,
And
but it almost faded away. It was like none of it mattered. At that moment, it was just being present and with what is. So there was some interesting moments through this whole process and this journey, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm learning.
thank you so much for sharing that story. There's so much there. And I wish more people knew that really that's what's being asked of us in those final moments. Something that we are all able to do, which is just slow right down and tune right in and take the lead and listen with every sense that you have. And it's really not complicated. But at the same time, it's like a spiritual practice in real time. That's how I would describe it. And I think it is very helpful if people consider that and have a practice before they get to supporting people at that stage, or they're at that stage at end of life themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Without that grounding, I think I would have a much harder time
Yeah.
to be holding space with another and not, knowing what their beliefs may be or their spiritual journey has been or is
Mhm.
necessarily, and not to impose mine on them, but
Mhm.
having my own practice and my own belief system grounds me to hold that space with all the other different forms and shapes of spirituality out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think something else that you mentioned too already is that having that time to contemplate your own personal myths and beliefs around death beforehand too is also a supportive practice, because I think it's less likely that you'll be maybe evoked, or you'll meet an edge if you've contemplated those things for yourself beforehand. I think it allows people in the role of companion to be more present.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Especially in what I used to always think of was that it's a fearful thing.
Yeah.
I should be afraid of death, that our primary purpose in living on this planet is to keep living, or that death is this end game,
Yeah.
so that, oh no, we don't want to go there. No, no, we have to maintain as best as we can and avoid the grim reaper,
Yeah.
which over the course of the last many years and the practices I've done, I've come to actually appreciate that image, to appreciate that that's part of the journey, and it shouldn't be a scary one. It's not a Halloween movie or a horror movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and we laugh, but so many people hold that narrative.
Yeah.
It's so fear-based. It's hard not to be in this culture with the messages we're given.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's so much power in having that story arc, even if it's not explicitly stated, like what you believe, and what you've just shared, this idea of death being part of life, death being natural, death being something that isn't something to be feared. Or of course there will, I think, always be some fear because it is the unknown, and that only makes
Mhm.
sense. But I think when we as companions to the dying can have these story arcs that are different than the ones that we're often given in this dominant culture, it can really be supportive in the most subtle ways, again, without even having to explicitly state what your story is.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And to
Yeah.
be in companionship with someone on that journey, I think is primarily um, the aspect of they're not doing this alone.
Yeah.
That aloneness also in our world has been taught when you're alone that you're lacking in something.
Yeah.
And to imagine that one belief might be that, well, when I die, I'm going to be completely alone. And we can have conversations around that. What does that mean? And why is that a belief? Um, and what does loneliness mean? Because to some people, that's a godsend. Oh my God, I'm away from people, too many
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
For others, it's like, I want to be around people and my loved ones. And what does that look like for us. And so to be with someone and just, even if it's a non-verbal space holding, it's
Mm.
just to be there.
Yeah. Okay, Tim, if there was one thing you would like the dying and their people to know, what would it be?
Mm, I think the last statement
Mm.
and our last conversation is probably what I would share is you're not alone.
Mhm.
That as humans, as a living being, we're all going to be going through this process.
Mhm.
And we're in that, as someone said, on that freeway, and we don't know when our off ramp is. So to not be alone in the fear, in the joy, in the sadness, and the laughter, that all of this process that we go through in life of living is to be witnessed.
Mhm.
And especially in those last moments of living, is to bear witness. And we don't have to be alone in that time. So whether it's someone that's not a death doula, if it's a doctor or a friend or family, or just to have someone there with them, that could be a spiritual moment, to have another human witness that human's transition.
Yeah, so much power in that witnessing.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
see you.
Yeah.
I see you.
And I'm here. You're not alone. Mm. Okay, Tim, let's dream a little bit. Let's think to the future. If you're dreaming into the future of death care, what do you think is needed, and how do you see us meeting death with more acceptance and grace?
Mm, I think that what I would love to see more of is choice,
Mm.
being able to choose and have that autonomy to choose how and when we want to depart. I see a lot of medical systems now and even governmental systems that try to hold on to a life that is painful, is restrictive, and is debilitating for both the person that's going through that process, but also the people that surround them. And to kind of be in that thought process, or that this mindset in our culture that we have to prolong life as long as we possibly can. My dream is, my hope is that we can all choose when we want to go, how we want to go, if we do have that option, and to have more opportunities and possibilities through those, whether that's uh, medically assisted, or however it is, but just to make that our choice as individuals and not a governmental choice or a cultural choice. Me as a person, as a human that's come into this world, I came into this world through the energy of love and companionship, not always, but as I entered into this world, I didn't have another human holding my hand on that journey. And through the process and the practice of living through my lifetime, a lot of learning that happens. And we're taught to be our own individual selves. And yet, when it comes to certain things like death, no, you have to follow the rules of which
Yeah.
community culture has set up and created. And there's a negativity around that if you don't follow the rules. I want people to have more choice.
Yeah, it sort of circles back to what we were talking about before the interview, when we were talking about, people, for example, that get a cancer diagnosis and feel like the only choice is in this province, BC Cancer Agency, and they're an incredible agency, and for most people, that is the most fitting choice. But there are a lot of other options out there, and so highlighting those, because without knowing what the other options are, people are unable to make informed decisions, the decisions that are right for them. So, okay, dreaming into more choice. All right, I'm dreaming that dream right along with you, Tim. So, to end our conversation today, I'd like to pull a card from my gratitude card deck. It's created by the schooloflife.com. There's some sweet little cards here with some beautiful, you'll appreciate this as a photographer, beautiful images on the back and some words of gratitude on the front. So I pulled this card. It looks like a very ancient picture of a mother and some children.
And her suitcase was probably little.
It was probably the tiniest suitcase ever. Our
Oh,
parents met and managed to make love successfully, and their parents did too. We so nearly didn't even exist.
oh my gosh, I love that. Wow. Wow. And even though we might have had a hard and challenging time with our parents and parental models, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here.
We'll be here. And I think that's such an interesting way to end this conversation because I think so often there's this question like, why do we die? It's like, why are we even ever born? Like the odds of us being born are ridiculously low. That's the more interesting question. Like, how did we
Right.
get born? Why are we alive? Not why do we die?
Exactly. Oh my gosh. And how did we end up in this time on this planet, knowing these other people, these other souls on this time, this very short timeline that we're on? All of these miracles, I like to call them, had to happen for everything to come together for this perfect moment.
There you go.
Because otherwise, it'd be something else.
It would be.
Which I love the all of the things about quantum physics and quantum
Uh,
entanglement. Like we could be having this moment in multiple other realities. And, oh,
yes. Oh my gosh. And we started today talking about time and space and all these big things. It sounds like we need to go back to Lighthouse Park and continue this conversation.
I would love that. I love these conversations. Yes, please.
Thank you, Tim, so much for being here and taking the time today to support the Living Resource Project. And if you want to know more about Tim, the Doulas Project, you can pop over to www.endwell.ca and you'll find Tim's info in our show notes. So grateful for you. Thank you.
I'm so grateful for you for inviting me to have this conversation. Thank you, Tracy.
Of course.
Mm.
Okay, until we meet again. Bye, Tim.
See you.